What's going on, guys? It's Miggs with PolarPro, and today's video is all about the brand new Osmo Action, and I'm gonna show you settings that will improve your video quality. So let's get this video started. So right out of the box, the Osmo Action is gonna be set to its factory settings, but as creators, we wanna achieve the best looking footage for our projects. So with that in mind, I'm gonna show you guys 5 settings to consider in order to achieve that cinematic look. The first setting we're gonna talk about is the color profile of your camera. The Osmo Action's color profile is set to normal right out of the box. Although it looks good when you're previewing it on your camera, the colors are actually baked in with high contrast and high saturation. The downside to leaving it on a normal color profile is that it leaves you little to no room for correction in post, and that's why you have to switch it over to D-Cinelike. D-Cinelike is one of DJI's flat color profiles, which gives you the maximum amount of data and information from your shots, which gives you the best quality when you grade them. Having a flat color profile gives you more post-production flexibility because it allows the camera sensor to give you as much dynamic range in order to not lose as much detail in the shadows and the highlights. To access the color profiles, all you have to do is slide from right to left, click the video icon, and it will show you the color settings. Now switch it from normal to D-Cinelike. The next setting is resolution. When shooting cinematic footage, it's best to shoot at the highest resolution possible, which is 4K. The great thing about shooting in 4K is that even when you're editing on a 1080 timeline, having a 4K clip has more pixels than a 1080 clip, so when you need to recrop or reframe your composition, you don't lose any quality. To set your resolution, all you have to do is swipe up and then slide over to 4K. Make sure you don't pick 4:3 ratio because we want to shoot on a 16:9 ratio. And then for our frame rate, we're gonna set it to 24 for now. So the third setting we're gonna talk about is shutter speed. In videography, there's a general rule that videographers follow, which is the 180-degree rule of shutter. And what that means is that, let's say I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, you're gonna go 1 over 2 times 24, which is 1/48. The problem with that is most cameras don't have 1/48 shutter, so the closest to it is 1/50th. This will be my shutter speed throughout the whole video, unless I boost up my frame rates for slow motion. So if you're shooting slow motion, let's say 60 frames per second, your shutter speed's gonna be at 1/120th. If you're shooting at 120 frames per second, then it's gonna be at 1/240th. So I'm out here with my friend Nathan to do some rock climbing to show you guys some examples. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you're shooting out in bright conditions like what we have out here today, it's hard to get your exposure right following the 180-degree rule of shutter because your composition tends to be blown out. The most effective way to compensate for the overexposure is to use ND filters. And thanks to our engineers, we have a great selection of ND filters for your Osmo Action, which ensures that you get the right exposure and right shutter speed for your cinematic needs. Having multiple different strengths of ND filters is important to have in your bag in order to capture cinematic footage, as it keeps your shutter speed at double the frame rate while exposing your composition correctly. If you're interested in Osmo Action Cam ND filters, we have a link down below to our website so you guys can check it out. Now let's head over to Nathan so we can get some example shots. Setting the scene to double the frame rate produces the right amount of motion blur in your footage to make the scene look natural, just as how we see motion in real life. So the fourth setting we're gonna talk about is ISO. This is the camera sensor's sensitivity to light. The higher your ISO, the brighter your image gets. Typically, boosting up the ISO is helpful in cases where you need to brighten up the scene. The downside is the higher your ISO, the more grain and noise are introduced to your composition. So it's best to set your ISO at the lowest setting to get the best quality for your image. So we're gonna set the Osmo Action to 100. The fifth and final setting that we're gonna talk about is white balance. White balance is how warm or cool your image is. You don't want to set this to auto, especially when you're filming all day where the light is constantly changing. This is because the colors of your video will fluctuate, and this is a pain to edit. You can see that when I boost up my white balance, that the image is warmer. And when I lower it, it's a lot cooler. So I like to set my white balance to 5500 Kelvin, and this is a great starting point. All right, so that's it for this video. I hope you guys learned a few things on capturing cinematic footage with your Osmo Action. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with our adventures and our future videos. Well, it's Miggs with PolarPro signing out. Now get off that screen, grab your camera, go out there and capture perfection. Peace.